Okay, so I was going for like a Blair Waldorf look when I did the styling of the wig, but I might have been too close to the sun. Plus, I added way too much volume because the wig was really flat, and now you can't put a headband on it. But let's just start the video. Today we're gonna be talking about Gossip Girl. Mostly not just an apology in regards to the reboot, but a apology in regards to the original series, because I think that Gossip Girl might have been the first video in regards to the trend of the sexy teen crime drama thing. I'm not a huge fan of that trend in America. I wanted to film this intro in front of the Met, but I was in Fashion Week during Fashion Week in New York, and you cannot film on the Met steps when they're prepping for the Met Gala at all. They will literally stop you from doing that. So they got very angry. They took my camera. It's a whole thing. So now I'm filming on like the Met, the DC version of the Met, which is the Lincoln Memorial. You would think it would be a Smithsonian, but this is where people tend to conjugate in DC, and there's a lot of people who eat meals here, have dates here, which honestly I think is a very cute idea. But I want to talk to you about Gossip Girl. 2 reasons. It's not just an apology for the reboot, because the reboot is fully the worst thing. It's an apology for the original series. I think it's the first teen show that leans into the new genre of American teen shows that are like sexy crime dramas for teens. And I think it started with Gossip Girl and just kind of rolled downhill. So I want to talk about first why Gossip Girl was problematic in the first place, and why the reboot's just a result of this weird trend that's going on in America, this hyper adultification of teenagers that I think might be a little bit not good for an entire mass of what is actually one of the most vulnerable groups of people. You know what I mean? Like, I graduated from high school 10 years ago. So when shows were coming out when I was a teenager, it was like relatable problems. Like the season finale was like, the SATs are coming, prep for college or whatever, and now the finales for teen shows is like that girl got pushed off a roof, which, like, how did that happen? And every single person in the show is like insanely gorgeous, insanely rich, insanely like just in a like leaps and guards ahead of where teenagers should actually be at that point in time. And I worry, because all the shows are focusing on these specific groups of people, that it's giving this weird message that like teenagers as you are not enough. And as, once again, shows growing up that I loved were about people that kind of looked like me and had similar problems to me. And the reason why I feel such a nostalgia toward those shows, because it really reinforced the idea that I'm not alone, and I don't think that that's the case anymore.
I bet that filming this in a bathtub drinking champagne on the Lower East Side feels appropriate for this video. Let me close the window. I'm not worried about sound. And you know how New York never sleeps. Alright, so what made the original Gossip Girl so iconic? Now, we do have to talk about the actual marketing for Gossip Girl, because the marketing for Gossip Girl was interesting, and I don't think it would fly today, because it's literally marketed as like a scandalous teen show where it's just filled with sex and drugs and money, and like, you shouldn't let your kids watch this, which is like literally what got me to watch, honestly, because that's Gossip Girl came out when I was a freshman in high school, I think. Yeah, when I was a freshman in high school, which was a long time ago. Anyway, but that's not actually what made this show iconic. I mean, yes, it was cool watching them be like glamorous trust fund kids and like watching them like have money and do a bunch of stuff, but the characters were well developed. I think sometimes when Hollywood knocks it out of the park once, they will assume the wrong thing is what made the show or movie successful. Like, remember when Get Out came out and then every single horror film had a black lead for some weird reason? And I'm just like, okay, yes, we do want more black leads in horror, but also that's not what made Get Out popular. It's that it was a nuanced take on racism in a modern world, which we are very much so starved for in current pop culture, in this like time period. And so, yes, you could put a black person in the lead of this movie, and that's horror, But if you're not going to even talk about her race while in the movie, what's the point? And I am referring to Ma at this point. That movie was horrible. It was so bad. What were they doing? Okay, so I think that's what happened with Gossip Girl, to be quite honest. They were like, oh, it's scandalous teens that makes everything popular. Which, no, that's not what made it popular. It was the character development. And I think it's the same thing goes with the costumes, because everyone really hates the costumes from the reboot, and I understand why. It's not that the styling is bad, because I thought about that. I went and rewatched the original, which is why this video is taking so long. I had to really bite down to watch the original all the way through. And then I went through and watched and looked at the costumes once again for Gossip Girl the reboot. Technically speaking, the costumes for the reboot are better, but why we hate it so much is because there's no character development for any of those people. Let's think about the costumes for each person. I'm going to break it down now. Blair dresses this way and it makes sense for her character. She thinks of herself as the queen, which is why she's constantly wearing a headband. She dresses in a very regal fashion because she's very uptight because her mom's a perfectionist, which leads her into having really high standards and really high expectations for herself because her parents do. Which leads her to dress like that. And it also you can tell that her sense of style is heavily influenced by her mother's brand, which I honestly, genuinely love. A lot of times with shows, the parents are there for no reason. They don't add anything to the story, or they're constantly hindering the kids as some weird villain, which is not the case. We should stop making parents villains in shows like that. And then they really don't add anything to the character development of the main cast, so it just feels like filler. You're just putting parents in here because you need to have a 45-minute runtime to make sure that the show's an hour instead of 30 minutes. So you put all of this stuff about random adults that I don't really care about. That's not the case with Gossip Girl. Every single parent was a reflection of their kid, and every single storyline with them in the first few seasons was a reflection of what was going on in the kids' lives. And then something went off the rails with Gossip Girl, I think either during the second season or before the second season, because season 3 is a mess, and everything past season 3 is a horrible mess, and I can start feeling it in season 2. We talk about Serena's look. Serena's look is very bohemian, but that makes sense because she used to be a party girl. Yes, she's trying to change her ways, but that still exists. It's not like it's gone. When people change, they don't change all at once. They change in phases. And so they still show her laid back energy, which makes sense because her mom used to be a rock star groupie. Same thing with me and his Prince Charming look, because he's expected to follow in his father's footsteps and expected to do whatever his parents say. And so of course he has a very clean cut, a professional look because they want him to be successful. Chuck, which I think is hilarious. I love that they made him into streetwear, but obviously messed up on purpose, or they did it unintentionally. But I love how every single time he wears streetwear, you're like, what's going on? But it feels like it's on purpose, because of course Chuck has no idea what streetwear is. He's a trust fund kid. He just thinks it makes him look badass, and it does. He just wants to look like a bad boy, and so he dresses in streetwear, which honestly makes sense for the trust fund kid to think that that's what makes him a bad boy, is dressing that way, especially considering how off it is. It's so off, it's hilarious. I'm showing this video, I hope I find the photo for this voiceover, because what is this? What's happening here? It's my favorite Chuck outfit, you can't wrong me. It's so good because it makes sense for his character to dress this way. And even when you think about Dan and Jenny, and I know people hate Jenny, I don't understand that hate. I will defend her forever, because it's not that she was bad, it's that she wasn't meant for that world, and so things constantly go wrong for her, and so she reacts in a horrible way because things shouldn't be going wrong for her as badly as they do. But because she's poor, of course things go wrong for her when she's trying to infiltrate a world like that. Dan dresses very much so I'm not like other boys, and that makes sense because he's the guy from Brooklyn that's not rich. And then Jenny dresses in this very I love Jenny's costume development because I love that the costumes change as she becomes more corrupt. I think that's brilliant. I love that. I love how there's like an evolution to her style during the show. I found her costumes honestly the most interesting. And I know that might sound crazy because everyone hates Ginny, but I really do. I love the way that she slowly starts to migrate over to this rocker look as she becomes more entrenched inside of the like socialite world in New York. I think it's a very compelling way to deal with her character. The costumes aren't that great. When you really look back at them, they're very much so of the time and they make sense for the character and for each character, but they were just kind of okay in the bigger scheme of things. What made them so iconic is the character development. There's so much character development. You know pretty much who each person is, at least a glimpse by the end of the first episode, and you're like sealed into their identity by the end of the second episode. It's brilliant. Second episode, first season, you know exactly who each person is, what their motivation is, and what they're going to do for the rest of the season, and then it just kind of unravels itself. And they show you instead of telling you. There's nothing more annoying to me about the reboot than the fact that they keep trying to tell me things without actually showing me things. Why am I watching someone tell me a story? Just show me the story. You know? Okay, I figured out what happened. They changed showrunners. I knew something was weird. They changed showrunners in between the first and second season, and that's why it got super weird. Okay, so there was a recession for all the Gen Zs who are watching this. There was a huge recession that happened in between the first and second season of Gossip Girl. And I think they're reacting to their hope. They're trying to make sure that this show stayed popular during the recession. Which, yeah, if you make a show about a bunch of rich people during a recession, sometimes it goes badly. So back to my secondary point. Gossip Girl, the original, may or may not have, I have a theory, that it changed the course of all teen dramas going forward. Because do you notice how teen dramas are all like sexy murdered teen dramas? And that easily all these characters could just be in college and it would be less creepy? Because I want to talk about this thing that I've been trying to talk about, and I've been trying to find the right video to talk about it. I literally feel super uncomfy watching a lot of teen shows right now because they're so sexualized in a way that they have never been before. And I think that is caused by Gossip Girl. You don't have to show, I completely understand that the actors are not teenage, you know? I understand that the actors playing these roles are in their early 20s. But what I don't like is that they're playing 16-year-olds and I'm watching a sex scene with them. Why? You can just know, I can know they had sex without showing me they had sex. You can literally just be like, fade to black, and wake up and they're like in that weird L-shaped blanket where the girl's boobs are covered. I will know that they had sex. You could just show me kissing and then fade to black. They're aggressively making teenage shows very adult, and I'm just wondering why. Because it feels icky. It feels very icky. I was rewatching Degrassi because it's on YouTube, like the entire thing. So I had all the channels growing up. So I watched Degrassi on CTV because we had CTV for some reason. And I also watched Skins on E4 because we had E4 growing up. So I want to talk about both of these shows in relationship to this conversation because in the UK and in Canada, they actually cast teenagers to play those roles. So they can't really show you anything that you couldn't show on a teenager on television, which I think is honestly the best approach to teenage shows because it feels a bit. There's so many sex scenes in Euphoria. And I know, it's so real, it's so relatable. Yes, some storylines in the show happen to people, but not all at once in the way that it does in the show. And then also, they're too young for these storylines. I will repeat, they are too young for these storylines. especially considering the explicit way that they're showing each storyline through television. I should not have seen Cassie's boobs. The way in which I see, like, you're literally showing what is essentially to me and to a whole demographic. Right? The sexualization of Maddie, especially her beginning storyline, made me uncomfortable. What you're telling me she lost her virginity to a 40-year-old and we're just gonna pass by that like that was okay? It wasn't. And Riverdale, like Gossip Girl, the reboot, most teen dramas right now, they could easily just be in college and it would not change a thing about anything else. Why are they 16? I make my point. It's very weird. I don't like it. And I think that the majority of this is happening because, once again, Hollywood likes to, when something goes well, they tend to just regurgitate it in a way that makes no sense. Like, you know what kind of reboot I would actually really like in regards to a teen show that we really need to see? My So-Called Life. It's my favorite teen show. There was only one season. Every single aspect of the show that's in My So-Called Life is kind of hit on in Euphoria, but in My So-Called Life, it's shrunk down to like a teenager's point of view of it, and it makes more sense and it seems a lot more realistic. They do talk about being gay and like how to deal with that in a public setting. In the 90s, that show was amazing. And the gay character is also Hispanic, and they flesh him out completely. I'm in love. They have a guy who's kind of incel-like, and he's coming to terms with how often he's self-sabotaging himself, and it's beautiful and perfect, and I love the way that they dissect it, because literally it's like, hey, maybe, just maybe, it's you. You may be the problem here. And they do it in a way that's not insulting to him, and I love it. Because it's you're literally shown his self-sabotage. They're showing it not like other girls. Girl is not competing with the popular mean girl because they used to be best friends, and not in a way where you can't really tell they used to be best friends. Like every single mean girl and the not like other girl used to be best friends, but they never show you that. They just like tell you that's the case and then show you how mean she is to her. In My So-Called Life, they show you the rift. And they kind of show you that they're still friends. And they kind of show you the complicated nature of her becoming very attractive and very popular and a power dynamic she's not used to. They literally show you her uncomfortability in a way that's so relatable. Like, My So-Called Life is the perfect teen show, and it irritates me how that it got canceled in the first season, because that is a reboot we need. Where all the things I like about Gossip Girl are all the things that are shown in My So-Called Life in a way that is very relatable and is shown in a very realistic fashion for a teen show. That's a reboot I want to see. That was a beautiful show. That was well written. The character development was chef's kiss, and it was just a perfect teen show, and no one's rebooting that. I don't get it. Not every character has to be likable, and we need to get away from that. I think a lot of people, because of parasocial relationships, want every character they relate to be 100% likable. But let's be frank, you're not 100% likable. I'm not 100% likable. I have problematic things that I do all the time. And I know that I'm doing them, and it's not that they're problematic per se, it's that I'm doing what's in my best interest, and sometimes that negatively affects other people. But that's what everyone does. Most people do things in their own best interest, and the people who don't, who constantly do things to make sure that everyone's okay, ends up suffering. And that is a great conversation that needs to be had, that we do not have, because we're all trying to apologize for things without actually having to change at all, which is not good. So, final thoughts on Gossip Girl being iconic. It's not the glitz and the glamour that made it good. It's the character development, and also the scandalousness of that show may or may not have affected the entire teen show drama in America for a while. Highly recommend, if you want to watch a show that's very much so teen drama, but it's not the worst, watch Degrassi. It's completely on YouTube right now. It's a great show if you've never seen it. Gen Z, even that show had a reboot. Oh my God, Degrassi had a reboot. I'm just thinking about that right now. There's an original Degrassi, which I also watched, the one from the 80s, and then they had a reboot. And the reboot was great until like the later seasons, but the first amount of that reboot was insanely good. I think the reboot might have been more popular than the original show, because I'm thinking about it now. I didn't know there was an original show until I watched it on YouTube. So yeah, if you want to reboot a teen show, follow Degrassi. Don't follow Gossip Girl. Way better show. And now let's talk about the actual reboot of Gossip Girl, what you guys came for.